Hey all, and welcome to episode 48 of Bicycle Touring Talk. First off, thank you to all of you,
the one and only,
for watching, and especially those of you who subscribed. We've reached 600, another big milestone. Last time I told you about a quick journey across Honduras, a country plagued with security issues. I had not experienced any problems myself, but was grateful for the warnings as they had made me more vigilant. Nicaragua had a much better reputation and promised to be what Honduras definitely could be. Paradise. After crossing the border, I found a cheap hotel that was run by an older man, but was in pretty rough shape. Considering that it didn't even have running water, it was actually not a very good deal. But I was too tired to worry about that. The next morning, I noticed that some improvements were in progress as there was a cement delivery via oxen cart. I found a good breakfast right outside from a nice lady. The price was right too. Now it was time to hunt for a map of Nicaragua. I walked all over Somotillo to find one, but wasn't successful. Wouldn't a stack of maps be an easy sell in a border town like this one? Back at the hotel, it was time to check out. It seemed like the owner's dog had a favorite sleeping place, right in front of my door. I had to wake the poor thing so I wouldn't have to push my loaded bike all over it. A short while later, I was back on the road, headed toward Leon, roughly 100 kilometers away. The road was anything but boring. I observed some large-scale agricultural operation with lots of workers in the field and a shelter set up. There were lots of little shacks at the side of the road that all had something for sale. The selection was limited mostly to snack food and drinks. I stopped at one that had ice-cold bottles of Pepsi to satisfy my thirst and energy needs. At some point, I heard a loud bang some distance behind me. Next thing, a big semi passed me at crawl speed. A tire had popped. I was reminded of my first Mexico tour when this had happened so close to me that the debris had hit the front of my bike and barely missed me. Was crime really the biggest concern for a cyclist in Central America? Honestly, I think road safety issues are equally serious here. The highway in Nicaragua had a shoulder, but the pavement was so rough at times that it wasn't a good option. As a result, I constantly found myself switching back and forth depending traffic. Lunchtime had another surprise. When I stopped at a typical roadside comedor, I simply ordered a meal without first asking about the price. The place looked like a budget restaurant for truckers and other working people, and I had never been overcharged at such an outfit. This time around, it turned out to be a mistake. The plate came up to 180 Cordobas, or around $9. While this wasn't much for North American standards, I could have bought 4 such lunches for the same amount of money in El Salvador. The road got a lot better closer to Leon. The city of Leon was busy but relatively easy to navigate compared to other larger Central American cities. I found a bicycle shop at the market, and the guys who worked there were excited to see a tourist on an older bike. When I asked, they gave me directions to a nearby hotel. It was a pretty basic place, but it was clean and even had Wi-Fi in the lobby, all for the equivalent of just about $6. Leon is a great old city, and I had plenty of time left to wander around before dark. There's just so much to discover. Historic buildings everywhere and a busy market. I was still hoping to buy a map of Nicaragua so I could actually orient myself and make a bit of a route plan. But no, a map didn't seem to exist. Nobody had one. Those kind of challenges are all part of the adventure, but they can keep you preoccupied. Later that night, I found out that my fellow cyclist, Jan from the Czech Republic, was also in Lyon. We communicated via Facebook and made a plan to meet up at his hostel in the morning, which was only a few blocks away. Before meeting up with Jan, I took some more time to go for breakfast and walk around the city. Finally, I came across a kind of tourist road map of Nicaragua. It wasn't perfect, but way better than not having any map at all. Jan was doing well and had booked a tour to visit a volcano later in the day. We had coffee and talked a bit about our planned routes. We both had the same idea of getting back to the ocean after leaving Lyon, but Jan had gathered a bit more information where I was just going by the map. My decision was to keep heading south, and the nearest town by the ocean seemed to be Puerto Sandino. So that's where I decided to go. It was only about 40 kilometers and the road was better than expected. However, there were some hills to get across first. Once there, I was a bit disappointed because there was no easy access to the beach. After some asking around, locals told me about Miramar, just a few kilometers away, so I decided to try that, but got disappointed there too. Mostly, there were only private residences, some in very poor shape. Then there was this one fancy surf camp run by a surfer dude type pretty boy who loves US dollars and pretended he had never heard of the local currency. All his guests were hauled in directly from the Managua airport, and all they were after was good surfing, no matter the price. I definitely wasn't going to give this guy my Panama budget, as I felt out of place here anyways. Eventually, I returned to Puerto Sandino and found another dollar-hungry hotel owner. His hotel might have been nice, but it was outside my budget. So I ignored him too and settled for a terrible little shack for 200 Cordobas. Nicaragua was funny that way. There were budget places like in Guatemala and El Salvador, but the quality of those was generally poor, while the nicer places were clearly much more expensive. There's a price to pay for perceived security, even if it's just that. As a guy on a 3-month tour, I simply didn't have the budget that shorter-term tourists had, so I avoided the more expensive places as much as I could. However, there was clearly a gap. The place I had picked had run out of water when I was there. I was told that the water delivery truck only came once a week and they had just run out. It meant no shower for me, except that there was one of those barrels that still had enough water for a duck bath. I also didn't get to swim in the ocean, so this wasn't very good. After dark, the light in my room also stopped working. I went out to one of the stores and bought a couple of beers. At least they were cold and made the dark room a lot more agreeable. You would think I'd have fallen asleep easily after such a day. But there was yet another problem. Noisy birds kept me awake pretty much the whole night. They seemed to be gathered in the room next door. Had I stolen their preferred place? Last week I told you how the hotel in Somotillo had been the worst of the trip so far. I sure hadn't expected to find one that was even worse only a couple of nights after, but did. After sleeping in a room with concrete floor, no running water and birds next door, I was happy to wake up and get ready for the day and get out of Puerto Sandino. About 10 kilometers were the exact same route I took to get there the previous day. Then I turned right onto what was supposed to be one of the two major highways to the Managua area. I was surprised to find the road that was so rough that I could barely ride on it. Buses and trucks were taking it too, but not very many, and they all seemed to know their way around the deepest potholes. Eventually, the road improved, but now I found myself either climbing hills or, on the descending side, fighting a strong headwind. Eventually, I came within 4 kilometers of Managua. I briefly considered taking the route into the city, but opted to take the highway toward El Crucero. I had no idea about the 13-kilometer climb. Otherwise, I probably would have stayed in Managua. But the ride was interesting with good views. It was almost dark when I finally got to El Crucero, and at first there didn't seem to be a place to stay. But it all worked out good in the end. After a little search, I found a very pleasant hotel with a clean and fully functional bathroom. It had Wi-Fi and a clean tile floor, even a fridge, and AC. All of this for about $2 more than I had paid for the shack in Puerto Sandino. Nothing made sense, but I was happy. I went to get some beer, checked my emails, and uploaded the latest pictures to my blog before falling asleep like a baby. The next day was February 17th, a Sunday. I started the day off easy by exploring a bit of El Crucero and going for breakfast. The town was very nice and colorful. Later I left it without really knowing how far I would go, but Masaya was only about 40 kilometers away, and I got there pretty quickly as it was mostly downhill. There's quite a bit to see along the way. Vendors were selling everything from furniture to garden sculptures and other artwork, all at the side of the road. Masaya was an interesting enough place on its own. But after lunch there, I went on to Granada. A big sign just outside of town claims that this is the oldest city on the entire continent. This had me wondering, didn't the Mayans have cities on this continent long before? How come they're not accounted for? Granada was an interesting place and a lot of fun. I had not seen so many other gringo tourists in a while, and it was a nice change at that point. Granada was like a bigger version of Leon. It was great because ever since leaving Leon I had been wondering if I should have spent an extra day there. As soon as I found an inexpensive hostel, I took it for 2 nights. Once again, this was almost too good to be true after what I had experienced at the ocean. I was now in a place full of younger people, and while it was simple, I had my own room, shared bath, and there was a lounge that was serving beer. Did I mention there was excellent Wi-Fi? I thoroughly enjoyed my extra day in Granada the following day. Granada was the first city on the American continent founded by Europeans. I spent pretty much the entire day exploring the surroundings. Granada is a magical place. Locals and foreigners seem to mix in a way I have not seen too many times. There are so many beautiful historic buildings in excellent condition. People are friendly. It is easy to spend an entire day around the downtown area and the market. However, there's more. Granada is at the shore of Lago Cosilbolca, also known as Lake Nicaragua. This is the largest lake in Central America, and when you're standing at its shore, it sure seems like you're at the ocean. The city is also surrounded by volcanoes, which gives it an amazing flair. Who knows why the founders picked this location, but it sure seems like the perfect choice. Not everything about Granada is perfect though. I was quite shocked to find the tourist center that is down by the shore in a state of decay. This is where the beach is, one of the biggest assets of this location. The buildings I saw were all in a poor state of repair, but what was even worse was the amount of garbage that was basically everywhere. The tourist center is like a huge park. While the buildings in this area were neglected, there were plenty of mango trees with ripe mangoes that were free for the taking. I spent a considerable amount of time exploring the area and taking pictures, some of which clearly show the state of decay. One thing about the shore is that it gets extremely windy. Could this be one of the reasons it wasn't popular with the tourists? Just outside of this park area, however, construction was going on, and it seemed like efforts were underway to rehabilitate this part of the waterfront. Overall, I was truly impressed with Granada. There are few places in the world that have this kind of potential. I have no idea how much has changed since my visit, but I'm sure the character of the city will endure. Enough of my 2 cents worth. I took a ton of pictures and they can give a much better impression. One day, I'd like to come back here and spend time exploring not just Granada, but the entire area all around this lake. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than you can see when just passing through as part of a Central America tour. If you can, take a couple of months just to explore Nicaragua. You will not regret it, and you'll likely make plans to come back for more. I know I'll be back at some point. As you probably noticed, the country was full of surprises and contradictions, and that's definitely part of the charm. Granada is pretty much in the south of the country, not that far from the Costa Rican border, but I was far from done with Nicaragua at this point. Some of the best parts were still ahead of me, except I didn't know it yet. Next week, I'll tell you about how I left Granada and ran into some of the most exciting places. It was all part of a journey I'll never forget, and I'm hoping that sharing it will encourage some of you to discover this amazing country for yourselves. You're halfway there. Subscribe to my channel and join me for the ride. I will see you soon. right about now.